When a powerful CEO shouted at a black waiter in front of a silent autistic boy, no one expected what would happen next. But what that waiter did didn't just change a family, it ignited a global movement that turned grief into healing and silence into a voice heard around the world. The soft clinking of silver against crystal echoed like music in the elegant ambiance of Meridian Bistro, an upscale restaurant nestled in the heart of Upper East Side, New York. This was where the powerful dined in quiet confidence, where deals worth millions were sealed with a toast and linen napkins bore embroidered monograms. At the center table sat Harper Langston, 38 years old, a self-made real estate magnate known across Manhattan for her icy poise and cutthroat precision. Her gaze alone could silence a boardroom. Beside her, her 7-year-old son Riley rocked slightly in his seat, murmuring a soft sequence of numbers, 765. His eyes were distant. Diagnosed with nonverbal autism, Riley hadn't spoken a word in 2 years. Suddenly, Riley screamed. His small fist pounded the table head, jerking forward in distress. Patrons turned. Harper froze. She'd spent millions on the best therapists, from Boston to LA, but none could stop these outbursts. Before she could move, a tall black waiter knelt beside Riley, calm and composed. He didn't say a word, just took a pen from behind his ear and began to draw something on a napkin. Harper's voice cut through the room. "Get away from my son now." The waiter didn't respond with words. Instead, he moved his hand gently across the napkin, drawing a slow spiraling pattern around a countdown, 7654. Riley stopped screaming. His breathing slowed. His eyes locked on the napkin like it was a life raft in a storm. "What do you think you're doing?" Harper snapped, shooting up from her chair. Her voice was sharp enough to make nearby guests flinch. The restaurant manager, Emmanuel Ross, hurried over, beads of sweat on his temple. "Ms. Langston, please." "He's just trying to help." "Help," Harper hissed. "He's a waiter, not a doctor. He has no right to touch my son." The man finally rose to his feet, tall, calm, dignified. "I apologize for the intrusion, Ms. Langston," he said evenly. "Your son was using echolalia, repeating numbers to self-soothe. I simply created a visual anchor to guide him back to calm." Harper's eyes narrowed. He knew her name, and he had just used a clinical term, echolalia, that she had only recently learned from a $900 an hour specialist. Who was this man? But before she could ask, a voice spoke that silenced the room. "Mommy, look." The voice was soft, trembling, and unmistakably Riley's. Every head turned. Time seemed to freeze. Harper's breath caught in her throat as she turned to her son. Riley was pointing at the napkin. 7, 6, 5, 4. It's a countdown. It helps me feel calm. The words were clear, whole, real. For 2 long years, Harper had begged, pleaded, spent fortunes, only to be met with silence. And now her son had spoken. Not just a word, a full, coherent sentence. Harper gripped the edge of the table, struggling to stay upright. Her world tilted. Nothing had ever prepared her for this moment. How did you, she tried to ask, voice trembling. But before she could finish, the restaurant's general manager, Charles Westwood, arrived, flushed, stiff, and flustered. "Mr. Elijah, please follow me to the office, now." He turned to Harper, apologizing profusely. "Ms. Langston, we are terribly sorry for this disruption. The employee will be disciplined immediately." Harper couldn't take her eyes off her son. Elijah, the waiter, stood quietly, unreadable. But there was something in his gaze Harper couldn't ignore. A storm not of rage, but of purpose. Elijah slowly unbuttoned his uniform vest and handed it to Charles with calm, practiced hands. Not a trace of anger, only quiet dignity. "No need to discipline me. I quit. Some places don't deserve the best of us." He turned back to Riley and smiled gently. "It was an honor to meet you, young genius." To the shock of everyone around, Riley reached out. His small fingers wrapped around Elijah's hand. "Stay, please." Riley's voice quivered, but it was real, live. Harper's breath hitched. She had watched her son spend hundreds of sessions curled in silence. No one, not the speech therapist, the neurologist, or even her, had ever connected with him like this. Charles cleared his throat again, trying to mask the growing tension. "Your car's waiting, sir. Don't make us call security." Elijah nodded, unfazed. As he passed the table, he placed a small white card next to the napkin, then walked out through the mirrored doors. Harper, almost without thinking, picked it up and read Dr. Elijah Grant, Ph.D., Behavioral Neuroscience, Specialist in Nonverbal Communication. She clutched it tightly in her palm. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. That night, Harper Langston didn't sleep. The business card sat on her nightstand like a quiet, relentless whisper. You saw what he did. You saw your son speak. So why are you still afraid? Across the hall, Riley was sleeping without medication for the first time in months. That should have brought Harper peace. Instead, it made her restless. She sat in the dark, staring at the ceiling, mind spinning. She had once fired 3 VPs in a single afternoon, moved billions with a single deal. But now she couldn't make one call. The next morning, her longtime friend, Dr. Nina Rhodes, arrived for their usual visit. As a pediatric neurologist, Nina had worked with Riley from the start. He hasn't spoken again since that night, Nina said gently, looking out the window at Riley, who was quietly sketching the number sequence in his notebook. Harper, you need to call him. It's not pride, Harper murmured, staring at the business card. Then what? She hesitated. Fear, Nina looked at her puzzled. You afraid? But Harper didn't answer because deep down she wasn't just afraid of Elijah Grant. She was afraid of what he might already know. That night, Harper opened her laptop with trembling hands and typed Elijah Grant. Her heart pounded when the first search results came not from restaurant job listings, but from scientific journals, symposiums, and academic citations. Dr. Elijah Grant graduated from Harvard at 22, PhD in behavioral neuroscience from Stanford at 26, a rising star in the field of nonverbal autism and communication disorders. But then he disappeared. Vanished from the scientific world 3 years ago after a scandal that sent ripples through academia. His younger brother, Julian Grant, who had severe autism, died during an experimental treatment at a place called New Path Institute. Harper's breath caught in her throat. New Path was one of the research centers owned by Langston Holdings. Her company, her signature. The realization was ice in her veins. Elijah hadn't been working at Seraphine by chance. He wasn't just a waiter who got lucky. He was there, watching her. Was this revenge? But what chilled Harper more than that possibility was something deeper. She remembered the way Riley had looked at Elijah, and for the first time in years, she didn't know what to believe. In a small apartment in Brooklyn, the only light came from a desk lamp casting a quiet glow over a wall covered in clippings. At its center was a single photograph, Julian, smiling eyes full of life. Around it, like puzzle pieces, were financial reports from Langston Holdings, medical memos from New Path, surveillance shots of Riley at school playgrounds, charity galas. Elijah stood in silence, arms crossed, breathing slowly. It wasn't obsession. It was justice. It was memory. It was grief. I'm close now, Julian, he whispered to the photograph. She's going to come to me, and when she does, I'll speak the words you never could. The phone rang. Elijah didn't flinch. It was Emmanuel, the maitre d' from Seraphine. She's looking for you, Elijah. Hired a private investigator. Her son's gone quiet again. She's desperate. Elijah closed his eyes. His chest tightened. A part of him wanted her to suffer, to know what it felt like to lose something precious. But another part, the part that remembered Riley's trembling voice saying, stay, ached. What are you going to do? Emmanuel asked. Elijah stared at the folder labeled Operation Truth. Exactly what I planned. Just not the way I imagined. 3 days later, Harper sat in a quiet coffee shop tucked between brick buildings in Soho. No assistants, no security, no limousine. She had parked her own car. Worn flats. For the first time in a long time, she needed to meet someone as a mother, not as a CEO. Elijah arrived right on time, dressed in jeans and a navy shirt with no trace of the man who once served wine at Seraphine. But what struck Harper most was what he did before sitting. He pulled a worn photo of Julian from his wallet, looked at it with reverence, and murmured something too soft to hear. When he sat, Harper said, "Thank you for coming." Elijah's reply was cold clear. "I didn't come for you. I came for Riley. You knew who I was, didn't you?" "Yes," he said without pause. "From the moment New Path took your son. My job at the restaurant, not a coincidence." Harper's voice trembled. "What do you want?" Elijah leaned forward, calm and unwavering. "I want to be Riley's private therapist, full access to his medical files, complete control of his treatment. Harper blinked. The waiter was gone. This man had come to reclaim a truth. Harper shook her head in disbelief. You want me to hand over my son to someone who vanished after a scandal? Elijah didn't flinch. Because I'm the only one who sees him. She stared. What are you talking about? At the restaurant, everyone saw a meltdown. I saw a child begging to be heard. His voice wasn't angry. It was steady, measured, too calm for someone who'd lost everything. Elijah. He's not improving under your current treatment, Elijah interrupted. He's adapting to survive it. There's a difference. Harper's defenses crumbled piece by piece. For the first time, she felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Helplessness. The powerful Harper Langston, who had stood before senators and CEOs, had no idea how to save her own child. She finally nodded. Fine, the contract will be at your door by morning. But as she stood to leave, she turned back. If this is about revenge, Elijah, if you're using my son to punish me for Julian, there won't be a place in this country you can hide. Elijah didn't respond. He just reached under the table and silently turned off a tape recorder. The game had begun, and Riley was both king and pawn. 3 months passed. Riley wasn't just speaking, he was communicating. He described feelings in numbers. He smiled without flinching. He hugged Harper without trembling. And he began teaching other children to express emotions through shapes and math, his own way of creating language out of silence. Harper watched one of the therapy sessions on video late one night. Riley was laughing, not scripted, not trained, free. Tears blurred her vision. Where were you all this time? She whispered to the screen. At Langston Tower, she was still respected, still feared. But inside, the iron walls of her persona were crumbling. That morning, a call came from Nina. We need to talk, not over the phone. It's urgent. 1 hour later, they met in Harper's private office. Nina slid a flash drive across the desk. Her face was grave. It wasn't an accident, Harper. Julian didn't just die. He was experimented on without proper consent. Harper's stomach dropped. Nina added one more blow. Riley is in the same program, Project Nova, and it's still active. Before Harper could process it, her private line rang. Ms. Langston, Elijah has locked himself in the therapy room with your son. He's broadcasting something to the entire house. By the time Harper burst through the doors of her estate, it was too late. Every screen, TVs, tablets, security panels lit up at once. Elijah's face appeared calm, unwavering, seated next to Riley in the therapy room. Good afternoon, Ms. Langston. He began, looking directly into the camera. I imagine you're watching. Don't worry, your son is safe. For the first time in years, truly safe. Riley smiled beside him. Hi, Mom. He waved softly. I'm helping Dr. Elijah tell the truth about Julian. Harper's knees went weak. Behind them, a massive board displayed dozens of documents, internal memos, medical files, encrypted emails, photographs of distressed children. Project Nova, Elijah said. A neurological experiment using unauthorized nanoparticles on nonverbal children, including Julian. Including Riley. He showed footage from inside New Path seizures. Restraint holds doctors whispering about acceptable risk margins. What you called progress was survival. And what you saw as silence, Ms. Langston, was Riley trying to tell you. They were hurting him. Harper froze. The truth wasn't just in data, it was in her son's eyes. And for the first time in years, she finally understood what he had been trying to say. The elevator couldn't move fast enough. Harper and Gina reached the therapy room doors, locked sealed from inside. A crowd had formed outside, including stunned security guards and confused staff. Media trucks were already gathering outside the gates. Inside, Elijah was still speaking to the camera. Today, I'm not here to destroy anyone. I'm here to make sure no other child suffers in silence. Then came the footage Harper dreaded, her signature, on a document approving the expansion of Project Nova. She stumbled back, breath short, heart cracking. No, I didn't know. But deep down, she remembered. A rushed day, a thick folder, a signature scrawled between meetings, blindly trusting her team. Inside the room, Riley turned to the camera, clutching a small object. I feel better now, because Dr. Elijah stopped the medicine, the one that made my head feel like static. When the doors were finally unlocked, Harper rushed in. Riley, get away from him, but Riley stepped in front of Elijah, defending him. Don't hurt him, he said, voice firm. He saved my brain. The words shattered her. Not because they were dramatic, but because they were true. Harper stood frozen, surrounded by the wreckage of her silence. On every screen in the room, Julian's face now stared back. His photo eyes, kind smile wide, lingered like a ghost with something left to say. Elijah rose slowly. You have two options, Harper. His voice wasn't threatening, it was steady. Final. One, deny everything, bury the truth, sue me, try to reclaim your empire. But the evidence has already been sent to the press, the DOJ, and every medical board that matters. He paused. Two, acknowledge what was done. Use your fortune, your name, your reach, not to defend yourself, but to repair the damage. Nina stepped forward. Harper, this is your moment. Don't waste it trying to cover a past you didn't fully choose. Harper's lips parted, but no words came. Then Riley walked over and placed his small hand in hers. Mom, Dr. Elijah says you didn't know, but now you do, and you can help. It wasn't a plea, it was a quiet call to courage. And as her son looked up at her, not in fear, not in shame, but in trust, Harper realized this was the moment she'd been running from. Harper's fingers trembled as she looked around the room. Not long ago, this space had been a private retreat, marble floors, priceless art. But now it felt like a courtroom, a confession booth, and a battlefield all at once. She turned to Elijah. I don't expect forgiveness, she whispered, but if there's still a way to fix this, I'll take it. He studied her long and silent. Then he offered his hand. Not in victory, not in dominance, in partnership. She took it. Outside news crews were already airing breaking headlines. The Langston legacy was crumbling, but inside something far more powerful was being built. From this moment forward, Harper said, eyes steady, every cent I made from Nova will go to healing the children it hurt. Elijah gave a single nod, the kind that holds more weight than applause. Then let's start rebuilding, he said. In that room, something unspoken passed between them. Not absolution, not trust, but a beginning. And outside, the wind shifted gentle now, as if even the air understood something sacred had just happened. 3 years later, the Nova Reborn Foundation opened its doors to the world. No champagne ribbon cutting, no speeches by celebrities. Just quiet rooms, warm light, and children being heard. Harper stood by the window of the main building, watching Riley teach 2 younger boys how to express feelings through math. His method equation-based emotion charts was now used in 5 countries. You still think about him, she asked softly, sensing Elijah step beside her. Every day, he said, watching the children. But now it doesn't hurt. Now it guides me. Harper handed him a cup of coffee. I lost an empire, she murmured, but somehow I've never felt richer. Elijah smiled, glancing toward the courtyard. In the center stood a bronze plaque beneath a framed photo of Julian. So no child is ever silenced again. It was more than a memorial. It was a promise that silence would no longer be mistaken for peace, that vulnerability would be met with protection, and that sometimes from the ashes of our worst mistakes, we build the kind of love that can't be undone. The Senate hearing room was silent. Harper Langston stood alone before the committee, no lawyers, no PR team, no makeup crew. Just her, a microphone, and the weight of what she'd done. She took a breath, eyes scanning the crowd. Cameras, journalists, senators, but none of them mattered. In the front row sat Elijah, Nina, and Riley, her son, once silent, now sitting upright, calm, proud. I came here today not to defend myself, Harper said, but to admit I failed. Not just as a CEO, but as a mother, as a human being. Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. I signed off on things I didn't understand. I let silence grow because it was easier than facing the truth. But silence almost stole my son. It killed Elijah's brother. She paused. And I will spend the rest of my life making that right. No applause followed, just stillness. And then one small sound. Riley stood up, clapped. Once, twice, then again. The room joined him. That moment was not about redemption, it was about recognition. That even the most powerful can fall. But those who rise with grace, with truth, and with love can change the world. At the edge of the Nova Reborn Foundation grounds lies a quiet garden. No marble statues, no plaques in gold. Just wildflowers, a wooden bench, and a stone engraved with the name Julian Grant forever heard. Elijah visits every week, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with silence. This time he came with Riley. The boy carried a tiny recording device, an old one with peeling stickers. "What's that?" Elijah asked, kneeling beside him. Riley set it down at the foot of the stone. "So Julian can talk," he said, "if he wants to." Elijah's throat closed. He looked away, blinking hard, but the tears came anyway. "Thank you," he whispered. Later, Harper joined them. She didn't speak, just sat on the bench, her shoulder barely touching Elijah's. No one said the word family. They didn't have to. Because in that space between grief and healing, between what was lost and what was found, something whole was finally growing. Not in spite of the pain, because of it. In one of the therapy rooms, Riley stood before a chalkboard. He held a stick of colored chalk, each hue representing a feeling: yellow for joy, blue for sadness, green for calm, red for frustration. "Today we'll learn how to draw. How you feel," he told the class, his voice confident. He once couldn't speak at all. Now he taught others to express what words could not. Harper stood in the doorway, hand over her mouth, overwhelmed. She remembered all the nights praying just to hear one word from her son. Now he was teaching others to speak in colors. A little girl raised her hand. "What color is hope?" Riley thought for a moment. Then carefully he drew a soft silver circle in the center of the board. "This one," he said. "It doesn't shine loud, but it's always there." Harper felt her knees go weak. Beside her, Elijah whispered, "He sees the world differently." "No," Harper replied, eyes brimming. "He helps the world see itself." Each week, Nova Reborn receives hundreds of letters, some from parents, others from former teachers, a few from grown adults who were once silent children. But one envelope postmarked from Kenya stopped Harper in her tracks. Inside was a photo of a boy named Musa sitting in a simple classroom with a chalkboard behind him. Scrawled across it, emotion chart, Riley's method. Attached was a note. "My son didn't speak for 6 years. Last night he said, 'Mama.' I wept. I don't know your foundation, but I know your ripple reached my home. Thank you, L." Kamau Harper handed the letter to Elijah in silence. He read it slowly, then sat down, burying his face in his hands. Julian never got that chance. But because of Julian, children across the globe now did. "We need to do more," Harper said softly. Elijah looked up, eyes wet. "We will." That night, they agreed all Nova research would be made open source, free to every therapist, every parent, every center that needed it. Because healing, when shared, becomes a movement. And Julian's voice, once lost, was now everywhere. On the 3rd anniversary of Nova Reborn's founding, the foundation hosted a quiet evening celebration. No red carpets, no media, just families, staff, and children, hundreds of them, laughing under strings of warm lights in the courtyard. At the center was an art display curated by the children. Riley unveiled the final piece, a hand-drawn portrait of 3 people holding hands beneath a night sky. Above them, dozens of tiny stars shimmered. One star was drawn larger than the others. "That one's Julian," Riley explained. "He watches us, keeps us safe." Harper's eyes filled. Elijah knelt beside him. "Why that star?" "Because it's the only one that never blinks." The crowd fell silent. Harper walked to the microphone, her voice trembling. "We lost so much. But from the ashes, we built something that breathes, that heals, that listens." She looked at Elijah, at Riley, at the families, and that loves. The lights dimmed, the stars above the courtyard flickered brighter, and under their glow, 3 people stood, once broken, now whole. Not by blood, but by truth, by trust, and by the kind of love that doesn't ask questions. It simply stays. Months later, Harper hosted a small dinner, not at a fancy hotel, but in the cozy kitchen of the Nova Reborn campus. The long wooden table was mismatched, the chairs squeaked, and the ceiling had a leak patch. But laughter filled the room like fine music. Riley helped serve soup. Elijah grilled vegetables. Harper stirred something on the stove, humming quietly a tune Julian once loved. When the kids sat down to eat, one little boy turned to Harper. "Miss Langston," he said shyly. "Are you Riley's grandma?" Laughter broke out, but Harper didn't mind. She smiled. "No, sweetheart. I'm just someone lucky enough to love him." After dinner, Elijah brought out a battered vinyl player and played a jazz record Julian had loved. Harper closed her eyes. Riley leaned his head on her shoulder. For a moment, it felt like the world had stopped. No guilt, no headlines, no legacy. Just love, just healing. And somewhere in that quiet room between clinking dishes and jazz notes, Harper knew this dinner would never truly end. It would echo in classrooms and journals and hearts for generations. In a new wing of the foundation, a hallway was dedicated to stories of transformation. Dozens of framed photos lined the walls, each one of a child who found their voice. In the center, under a spotlight, a bronze plaque bore the words, "This house is built on silence broken." Beneath it, Julian Grant, the first light. Harper ran her fingers gently over the engraving. "I used to think my legacy was the skyline," she whispered. "Now I know it's this hallway." Behind her, Elijah approached with a folder. "UNESCO wants to include Riley's method in their global education initiative," he said. Harper turned stunned. Really, they called it the most hopeful thing to come out of tragedy in decades. She blinked back tears. Julian would have been proud. Elijah looked at her eyes soft. He already is. They stood in silence, because in that moment the past didn't haunt them. It guided them. And in the soundless weight of that pause, Julian's presence wrapped around them like sunlight through glass. One night, Harper found Riley in the music room, fingers dancing over the keys of a dusty upright piano. It was the same melody Julian used to hum. She didn't speak, just sat beside him, hands folded, letting the notes speak for them. When the music stopped, Riley turned. "I miss him," he whispered. "I do too," Harper said. There was nothing more to say. They just sat. Later, Elijah entered carrying a cup of tea for Harper and a juice box for Riley. He didn't ask questions, didn't fill the silence. He just joined them. Three people wounded, woven together not through biology, but through the sacred act of showing up. Riley slid off the bench and hugged Elijah tight. "Thank you for teaching me my brain was beautiful." Elijah froze, overwhelmed. Then slowly he bent down and whispered, "It always was." "I just reminded you where to find the mirror." Outside, the wind whispered through the trees. No speeches, no therapy, just truth. Sometimes love doesn't need words. It just needs presence. When Nova Reborn opened its second campus in Oakland, California, one thing stood out immediately. There were no locks on the therapy rooms, no cold doorknobs, no keypads, just open spaces, natural light and doors that welcomed rather than confined. Journalists asked, "Isn't that risky?" Elijah responded, "You only lock doors when you expect someone to run." At the ribbon cutting, Riley held the scissors. Not Harper, not Elijah. Riley, a child who once banged his head against walls in fear, was now standing before hundreds smiling steady. "Kids like me," he said into the mic, "we don't want to run, we want to be seen." Applause thundered. Harper stood at the back, hands clasped, tears slipping down her cheeks. And somewhere behind the crowd, a mural stretched across the wall, painted by the children. A galaxy of faces, emotions, stars, and one name in gold. Julian. He didn't just change the system, he rewrote its soul. One rainy morning, Harper opened her mailbox and found a letter, no return address. Inside, a child's handwriting. "Dear Miss Harper, I'm 9. I didn't talk until last year. My mom showed me a video of you crying in court. I liked it. My teacher said sometimes being strong means saying sorry. You did that, so I think you're strong. Love, Frankie." She sat down on the porch steps, letter pressed to her heart. Across the courtyard, Riley played catch with a younger child. Elijah leaned against a tree, coffee in hand, smiling like a man finally at peace. The wind carried the scent of fresh rain and jasmine. For the first time in decades, Harper felt completely clean. Not forgiven, not perfect, but whole. She looked up at the gray sky, whispered softly, "Thank you, Julian." Because without him, she would have stayed powerful, but never human. She would have lived, but never truly loved. And in that final moment, she understood. Sometimes it takes a child's silence to awaken the loudest truths in all of us. And those truths never fade. True transformation doesn't begin with power, it begins with humility. The most profound changes in this world often start in silence. But when we choose to listen, to really see those we've ignored, we unlock something far greater than influence human connection.